Okay guys, hey, this is Dr. Sean again, and we're doing kind of the end of the second class and the beginning of the first class. It's going to be chapter 1, and that's going to be the basics of anatomy, physiology, and pathology. So stick with me and we'll go through a lot of stuff. So let's just jump right in. The first thing we need to do is we need to have a good understanding of a couple terms. So anatomy of physiology is very much a language. Now, about 40% of the words that you'll find are Greek, and about 40% of the words you find are Latin. And the rest is either names of people or kind of general terms that we've come up with over time. Now, the thing with anatomy is the only thing that's really a changing in anatomy. We haven't grown any new parts. We haven't grown new thumbs or anything like that, and as long as I've been studying it. So what happens is some things get reclassified and some things get renamed. For example, there was a recent part of the knee that they said a new anatomical discovery, which would be really a black eye to people who were doing surgeries and therapies and things like that, because that means they didn't even know about it, which is ridiculous, because people who really work with knees or shoulders or whatever really do know the anatomy, and they have to know the anatomy in order to be able to communicate from one person to another and be very specific. So it's very, very specific to have the words really pan out, and so that's why one of the reasons they're Latin as well. Some of them don't make much sense, and we'll get into those as they go along. But anatomy itself is the study of, omi really is, anatomy means you can't cut it down anymore. Tomi means to cut, and anat means you can't cut it anymore. It's just you'll cut it down to its basic pieces. That's anatomy. And when you've done that, you've separated it out and you've been able to name things. So anatomy, a functional definition of anatomy, is just what the pieces are called and where they are in relation to each other. That's it. That they're just saying it's where things are and what they are. Now, if you get into how they work, that gets into what's called pathology, not pathology, that's physiology. Physiology, when it doesn't work right, okay? Physiology is how it works normally. And then pathology is pathos, bad, is not good, is how it doesn't work normally. It's working incorrectly, for example. So those are the three main terms that we have to know for this. Now, chemistry is a study of chemical reactions, for example, and we'll talk about metabolism as the workings of the physiology and things like that, but we'll get into that in another chapter. But for today, we're going to go over some stuff called planes. Now, a plane is like the horizontal plane, okay? The horizontal plane is on the horizon. We don't use that in anatomy. In anatomy, if we look at this guy here, we see his hand out like this and the thumb. I'm going to show like this so I don't confuse everybody. But if we show someone in anatomical position, that shows the body standing in front of you. And as you look at it, as you're looking at the body, their right arm will be on your left and vice versa. So you're always looking at them. Okay, you're not talking about from you, you're talking about from them. It's looking at the body, and that's how we explain things when we do SOAP note charts, for example, or we use diagrams when we're doing different things like that. Now, if you look at anatomy, most of the time in the West, except for in England, we study the right side of the body. Now in England, for some reason, they study the left side of the body, and that's why the book Gray's Anatomy is really cheap. It's really freaking huge and thick and very detailed, which is very good. I think you should get one. But it also studies the left side, so it's kind of hard to compare the two. Now generally the body's pretty symmetrical, except for when it comes to things like the heart and the liver and the spleen, and most of the other internal organs are kind of offset. So we can do some of that kind of stuff, but it really doesn't matter. I mean, you have to study the whole thing anyway. As we get into, like I said, planes, if we're looking at a plane and we're looking at the body, we're assuming that it's laying down, which is going to be in what's called a supine position. This is supine. Prone would be that way. Okay. Usually when we have the body, for example, on a slab, we would be talking about it in the supine position. So most of our stuff is going to be either in this orientation or here. So when we talk about superior, for example, superior means towards the top. In this way, It means towards the head. Superior, we're always talking about the body, remember? Superior, inferior, posterior, anterior. If I put the body like this, superior up here, inferior, anterior, posterior. Posterior is back here, okay? This would be the midline, okay? We call it sagittal, all the way across the middle. And we would have a sagittal line if we cut the arm down this way. Like you can see there's these what are called meridian lines, which we see, and they come down this way. Those are sagittal lines. And so they do cut the body down this way. If I cut the arm off, that's a sagittal cut. Now, mid-sagittal is right down the middle. On the opposite side of that, we have transverse. Transverse goes across this way. Now, if I put the body like this, okay, this cut still this way, and separating this and this, so we can look at the insides, would be a sagittal cut, a mid-sagittal. If I cut the arm this way, it's still sagittal, okay? If I cut the body this way, that's transverse. Transverse, okay? It's hard to kind of like manipulate. It's easier to see on like a dummy rather than a picture. So we have sagittal cuts, transverse cuts, anywhere along this plane, for example. We have this way is a little different. So usually it's right around the top of the head. We call it a coronal cut or a frontal cut. Now we can do a frontal plane. We can cut this way, because whatever, we're slicing stuff off the back, for example. That would be frontal or coronal planes, okay? Other ones we could have oblique, which is at an angle other than 90 degrees on either the transverse or sagittal plane. Now this is not vertical. This is vertical outside of the body, and this is horizontal outside of the body. But on the body, this is still vertical, right? But this is still horizontal. But even if I put it like this is still horizontal. Does that make sense? So that's background stuff. Horizontal and vertical are background. We have supine, prone, okay? Anterior is the front, posterior is the back, lateral is the side, medial is towards the middle, superior toward the head, inferior towards the feet. Put it this way. Superior towards the head, inferior towards the feet, midline is still medial, lateral is still out here. This is still superior, or this is anterior, this is inferior. Okay, so that's our basics of the planes. So there may be some other planes they talk about in the book. I don't think there is. We have mid-sagittal, we have transverse, obliques, coronal or frontal. We have what's medial. Also, we have proximal and distal. So proximal and distal only has to do with the arms and the legs, really, or maybe the head. But if something is proximal, it's closer to the trunk. If it's distal, it's closer to the fingers, or further away. It's distant from the center line, really is what it is. If we're talking about the trunk itself, we're going to be talking about medial and lateral, superior and inferior. So we may see, for example, there's a gunshot wound, superior lateral, left lateral of the umbilicus, for example, by 3 centimeters or something like that. You can draw them that way, but we wouldn't say on the front. We would say anterior to posterior, for example, or whatever angle you would have. Now, you can get very specific with these, and it's very good to be specific with these because you need to know the specificity of the words, because words make a big difference in anatomy and physiology. So, this is Dr. Sean over at the I'm still teaching from home here. We're teaching anatomy 1310, 1320. This is the end of 1320. There's no real side quest today. We're going to go through a different video on that. Actually, I'll put the side quest in the comments, so you'll have to see it down there and answer the question. And we'll go from there. And look for the next video. Is going to be part 2 of chapter 1, I suppose it would be. So you guys take care of yourselves. Don't forget to subscribe, like button in there, and if you want to, you can share, but you don't have to. But make sure you tell other people that they've got to do their homework, and that's going to be down at the bottom. I'm going to do that in the comment section, so there's no place to look for that side quest, which I usually do. Take care and bye.